Well, good morning. It is 2 in the morning. Hello, Synachron. How's it going? It's 2 in the morning, so I'm ready to start my workday. Because what better time to get started on stuff than the middle of the night? Alright, so one of the things that I want to figure out is I want to figure out how we're going to do dynamic ripples. So the idea is basically that I should be able to do some of this stuff. I'm actually going to edit this. I don't want these particles slowing down my computer at the moment, so I'm just going to chunk that off for a second. It's not really finished, so I'm not worried about it. So what I want is, you know, like if a water drop falls into a river or a piece of water, we're going to need some sort of, you know, water droplet effect thing. So I need to figure out how to do that. And I'm not really sure how would be the best way. There were two things I was thinking of. One was that there would be, like, I could use some sort of animated decal or some sort of decal on it, but I'm not really sure. The other thing would be to make some sort of texture, which would be kind of dynamic, or not really a texture, I guess, but I mean, if we're going to draw it, I guess it has to be a texture. But if I've got the surface of a piece of water and I've got like a ripple that I draw on it, this thing is going to slowly expand. And disappear and everything. So I mean, if we just had a decal, we'd have to keep these things pretty small because, you know, they would look bad going into shore or whatever. If we actually simulated these things out, it may be a bit of an issue because we'd have to actually simulate them, and then how do we draw something that we've simulated here? We could draw it with a collection of particles, we could draw it with kind of a different texture that we wrote to the material, which we'd have to update every frame. So we'd have to know the expensiveness of updating a texture every frame. And how big that texture would have to be to get the precision that we'd want. I don't think I want to go the route of actually drawing a whole texture, though. I think I might just want animated decals of some type. So if I was going to do that sort of thing, Do I have a good animation that I could use to actually kind of use this? Doesn't have to be perfect. Just need something that I could use. I think this is the closest thing to a water drop that I've got in the game at the moment. So I could just play this thing whenever I have a drop of water as a decal or something. I don't know, that would be interesting. Hello, I'm an ore. I'm an ore. Yeah. The idea would be that we would have, you know, like what happens when you put a drop of water, you know, you drop a bit of water into water, you know, water droplet hits there, and it creates, you know, some sort of ripple. How exactly are we going to do that on the surface of this water? Because it'd be nice to have, you know, like a stalactite on the top here with, you know, water that drips and that lands in there, and then all of a sudden we've got stuff on there. I mean, we're not going to, you know, we also want stuff like if the character is running across the surface of the water, that we have some sort of system there to deal with that, where we can actually draw things where their feet hit the surface and crap like that. So I'm trying to think of a good solution for this. But did you try Googling it? Oh, I most definitely will, but I need to figure out what I want to Google first. Because there's a few different strategies that we could use, right? Like, if we're drawing a texture on top of this material as a decal or something, it's going to have certain properties. Like, it's not going to know that there's shore here or something else. So if we had an ever-expanding thing, it would, you know, it just expand into the rock and it would disappear. It also wouldn't follow any flow or anything else. Like, we could move it along the surface, but only as a circle. The different parts of the circle couldn't easily be morphed to do that. And like, if we wanted to add together certain effects, you know, like we can add them, but you know, it's only like a translucent decal add. You know, you can't really do too much else. We can't like reflect a wave off a shore or something and have like some sort of lifetime for it. So the question would be, you know, do we try to simulate it or do we try to fake it with decals? And I think I'll read about decals in real quick. Alright, so deferred decals are better. Select appropriate decal material. The decal performance depends on the shader complexity and the shader box size on the screen. So for decals, we use geometry that actually renders onto this other mesh. Alright. We only support deferred decals, and they only work on static objects. Normal blending is not currently wrapping around the object. What is this? It looks really bad. Decals may have 2x2 pixel block artifacts on the edges. Ooh. This must be used carefully as it has a very big performance impact. It returns the derivatives, the X and Y, and the decal's default texture coordinates necessary for anisotropic texture filtering. What the hell is the difference? Both pictures look like crap on the edges. Let's see. Animated decals, Unreal. So we can animate decals, that's true. Alright, so let's just... Alright, so we have decals. We'll just read about some of this stuff. So decals are materials projected onto the meshes on your level. Ability setting static removal, and the decal will project onto them. Decals be rendered at once without large performance problems. Alright, so decals are geometry in the world that we can change. Well, what can we do with the decals then? We could change the geometry that we're rendering for the decal. Alright, so they have different types of decals. So we can change all sorts of stuff with them. So if we had a decal there and we had a rock, we'd have to make sure that the rock doesn't actually get drawn with the water decal. And that would be with this sort of stuff with receives decals to be false. There's a sort order property? God, that's so hacky. A rotator material expression within the decal material. Alright, so we can do anything that we can basically do with materials, we can do to decals, including animating them and everything else. So this is kind of how those work. And we could animate it, and we could move it. Alright, so we can make a decal material. I don't know, I kind of want to learn about this stuff, so I guess maybe... I'll put a question mark. Dynamic water ripples with decals? Question mark. So we'll see. How come I can't click on this anymore? I can't click on it. Why? Stupid thing. Alright, so we need a new material, so I guess we need a decal material? Is this just a new... It's just a standard material, I guess. So let's do test surface ripple decal matte. Alright. So material, it's a surface deferred decal. Okay, so we got deferred decal here. Deferred decal domain need to be used blend mode translucent. Decal blend mode translucent. Alright. Can we use our flipbook for this thing? Our electric impact flipbook thing? I'm gonna copy this flipbook. And I think I can, I'll have to see if I can even, I'll figure it out. Thank you, Sonic Run. Yeah, the water, yeah, what, the water looks good with no effects turned on? Yeah, that's right. The best looking water of all. You spend all that time doing stuff and it's just a reflective surface with the color on it. So I need a texture sample here. Can I do sprite texture sample? This is a Paper 2D sprite. Alright, we can do that then. Just have a random thing here. Let's just do a basic texture sample. Are ripples and flows working? Well, what we've got working right now is we've got the rough shore edge, the calm shore edge, the surface noise, the calm water, ripples along the edges, and we've got motion. So we've got everything that we want. It's got all the normal maps and lighting, and there's a whole bunch of sliders and crap we can use to play with everything in the entire scene. So we've got lots of tools that we can use to make specific types of water. All right. Yeah, and all that's there. So and it looks real exaggerated when you're looking at it. When you're actually looking at it, you know, kind of straight on in the game, a lot of those things that look real dumb from like an overhead view actually look halfway decent from a non-overhead view. So there's different things that we can do. All right, so if we have these, we could have just crap loads of these decals, and we could animate them, and we could move them around. So I could have them move, but I couldn't have them deform. Can I have them deform? So let's see. We have a world position offset. Let's see if we can actually move this stuff around, like what sort of geometry we can use. So let's just throw time in here and like multiply with the sine cosine sort of thing with a value. So world position offset. Let's just throw a constant out here. That would be like 0.1, and then we'll just throw this in here. Or we need a sine function. Yeah, this would be hopefully something like, you know, a drop of water collides with our water surface, or, you know, various effects such as our main character running over the surface of the water, and every time his host touch the water, they leave, you know, an effect on it. And there's a few things I'd be okay with. Like, I'd be okay with not having flow work properly on it, but I'd really like to see what we can actually do. Fucking strobe effect. Decals intensify. Alright, so let's see what we can kind of mess with this. Yeah, this is not... I don't have a water ripple animation. I would ask Adam to go make one. This is the closest thing I've got right now. It's an electric discharge thing that he made for a separate thing. So it's just kind of in our library of stuff. So it would look close enough for, you know, for my sort of work. Or if I got all this crap working, you know, and be like, all right, you can just animate, you know, different types of water effects, and then we can play them when things, you know, hit the surface. And he could go, you know, he can go make cool art, and I can sit back and feel smug that I was able to do tech stuff, and then he can sit back and feel smug because he can actually draw stuff, and I can't draw worth shit. I'm not seeing anything move here. This deferred decal is not doing anything, even though the material has it doing things. In here, look, Kento 456. Yes, we're still working on the cave stuff. I'm working on hopefully water ripples, and this is a sprite sheet for something. I'd have to animate that, which would require some more logic. But I want to see what the decal system can do for maybe applying. You know, if it was raining out or something, we'd want a whole bunch of these. So maybe decals. I'm not really sure. Yeah, let's Google this. How to use this, because it's not working. Good question. I would also like to know. I wanted to set up a decal that allows the vertex of objects move just like those applied to the world position offset required materials, but it doesn't work. I tried all the blend modes. The normal works fine. Did I miss something? Well, let's just make it really, really obvious in here what's going on. So we got the decal size, like we've got this material as we can see here. It's doing its stuff. It looks like decals do not allow vertex movement. They do not allow moving in the material. Well, that is unfortunate. Also, this is starting to freak me out. Well, can we at least take maybe the UVs? And instead of maybe changing the world position by a value, we can, you know, change the UVs by a certain value? Alright, so we got 1 by 1. Alright, so we could move UVs around, but we're not going to be able to move the geometry around for this thing. How in the hell do we even, like... Let's see if we can do like a decal actor here. And is there anything on this actor that we can... There's like a sprite component, a decal. There's really not much to this thing. Like, it's got an arrow and a sprite component. And that's got nothing on it that we can mess with. Like, there's not even... We can't even give this thing circle geometry. Like, it's just a... It's just literally a goddamn box. I'm not really impressed with this. Like, it seems like a pretty good thing for adding a whole bunch of static stuff like bullet holes and blood spatter and crap like that, but and if it was animated, like, we could have single non-moving decals. And it could work, but we could change the UVs. But we can't do much with it, otherwise it's gonna look horrible. It's just working on the surface, so that's about it. Because I can imagine a whole bunch of decals all over this thing. Kind of bam, 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 bam. It would not look good at all moving. It would look awful if it was moving. Alright, well. Does it at least work with reflections? Looks like it works with reflections, alright. Destroy owner after fade. All that sort of stuff. Alright. Well, it's interesting. Let's see if I can get this animation working real quick. So I think it's inside of graphics, materials, sprite materials. It was mask lit sprite. Let's see, what was our base color in alpha was text coordinate, then we had a source texture, and we multiplied by vertex color. Alright, so if that's the material, I need the flipbook in here to actually be difficult to get these things where you want them sometimes. Alright. Man, it's like actually warm down here tonight. What is going on? So I need to figure out how to get this in here to get updated every frame. Like we've got our decal. Our decal actor, which is this guy. And we actually have to like do stuff with this. Like I don't think we can actually mess with this material from within this decal without doing things like making a custom C++ component and getting it to animate. Yeah, so we're pretty much screwed for just getting a simple decal prototype out there, because it's going to take more than just a simple amount of messing around to get it to work. That is unfortunate. Alright, well, I'll just start writing down what we can do. So things we can do with decals: we can draw lots of them, we can animate them, we can move around UVs, normals, etc. We have opacity. See, things we cannot do with decals. I guess we can move them around in the world. Things we cannot do. We cannot manipulate vertices. Trying to see if there's any checkboxes with any of these things that actually work. Not really. I guess we cannot draw non-rectangular prism shapes. Alright, so for us to use decals, we need to create a system for animating decals using flipbook information. It's probably a custom C++ component that I have to do to actually make it, and it'd have to like kill on anim finished and all the time, opacity, etc. We need all that sort of stuff. We need these static glue functions to create the decals. So you could be like, oh well, water drop collided with surface, spawn decal, spawn, you know, water particle effect, play noise, all that sort of stuff would have to happen. So we can't really move them. Well, so that's what we'd have to do for decals. What if we did the other way? What if we actually had a texture that was totally dynamic, that we wrote to every frame, and then we passed it into the water material itself, and then we drew our ripples, and we could dynamically update it inside of C++ somehow. So we'd have like a ripple field, and we would literally simulate the ripples as they were spawned, and we'd have some sort of thing associated with. What would we have associated? What could we have associated with ripples? We could have what? We got a texture, right? So we got 4 values. We got alpha, everything else. So we could have how many for a water shader? How many textures are we left with? We're at 15 out of 16 textures lookups. So we've only got one more texture we can screw around with inside of here, unless I start cutting stuff out. So yeah, we do have one texture which we could actually put in here and make dynamic ripples. I'd want to do it in C++, so we'd have a C++ component which updates this texture based on a ripple thing. Good morning, Karakin. I'm trying to figure out how to do dynamic ripples. I was looking at, like, we can do decals, but the limitations of decals are, you know, it's basically you can draw something in a square and it gets projected onto geometry in the world. It seems to work okay, but there's some limitations, like we can't move the thing very easily. It'll look real bad just moving it around. It'll look like a solid object instead of, you know, look like a solid ripple object as opposed to an actual like water ripple or something. So it'd work real well for like rain effects on still water, you know, boom, 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 boom. And we might actually need that, but if we had ripples like, you know, you drop a big boulder into this thing and then all of a sudden these ripples come out which kind of, you know, hit the walls of the cavern and come back, then, you know, it's not going to work. So I need to know how much it costs to render to a texture every frame, and I'm going to have to, based on the size of it and all that, so we have dynamic texture. Right. So let's think about how we actually build this, what we've got. So if we did this with a texture, can you make it a matte for a fraction of what lies beneath? The water is opaque, so no. If you're talking about the surface of the water, maybe. The reason the water is probably going to be opaque is because just lighting and all the rest is not going to work with a lot of that stuff. So if we got these water ripples, if we were simulating them, we have it's got 4 values that we could do for a thing. So we could do texture-based dynamic ripples. So what we would have is we would have texture data in memory, write data to texture every frame. It'd have to be on every frame. We can't only write part of the textures. So there's a limitation here on texture writing. We have to write to the entire texture each time. So there might be some issues there. We can't really optimize that. That's according to the documentation of the texture writing functions that I've seen for Unreal. It's like what we've got in our editor utils. We've got this update texture from render target. Is that the one? Well, it's this text source init, and then we can like write to a texture. But you have to like call lock and like do writing on it and then unlock. Alright, so I guess some other things, maps might be weird. But how would it work? If we have 4 channels, RGBA, we could have, what are our limitations? So like, let's say we had a ripple color. Is that a global color for the water object? Because we couldn't really have it, if we had it per ripple, they had all their own specific colors. We'd have to use all 3 channels, like RGB equals the color of the ripple, and then like A equals the opacity of the ripple pixel. So let me just put these on here as ripple color is local to the ripple itself. What if you have an opaque layer that shows what lies in the water, and you have an opaque-ish layer on top that shows the reflection of the sky? You can use the ripple itself as cutting mat on the upper layer, so the ripple only shows a refraction of the reflection showing the water beneath. Don't know if that's understandable. So you're saying basically there's a reflection, and you want to only change the reflection based on that? Is that what you're saying? So it would only change the, I guess, what in this case would be the surface normal of the water? I think that would work in some respects, but I think we need more than that. Like, we could do that regardless. Like this A value could be positive and negative, right? And that's, I could do some magic with some of it. So if the ripple color is global for the water, then we could actually have like, more information inside of this thing. Such as like A equals opacity of ripple, and then what would we have? Maybe, I don't know. We could have something else in there if we really needed to. What else? What other information we need? I mean, I could have that like surface normal in there, but I'm not sure I really want that. Well, right now, Caracan, what I'm trying to solve is not necessarily how we'll draw the ripples. I need to get the information as to where the hell the ripples actually are on the surface, right? I can't draw them anywhere if I don't know where they are. I need to know what I can even get away with. So some of these limitations, we'd have to need to know like when the water is actually on screen so we could update stuff, because we wouldn't want to be like writing to a texture that we're not going to actually use. But that's kind of, I mean, dynamic stuff, we could actually follow the path. Because the issue is we can't actually look at... God, we don't have anything for the decal material. We don't know exactly what we're working with, because the decal material doesn't know the pixel it's getting written to, as far as I know. Well, it knows the pixel color probably, and whatever shader it's using, it probably just doesn't know what source information. So we couldn't like look up the flow field data under the water for drawing a decal. So I guess we're gonna have to use. Let's see how efficient it is if we can actually get away with it. So what we're gonna do is dynamic texture based water ripples. So let's just see if I can do that. Let's see if I can get away with it. And we can basically create a dynamic texture. We can then update it, and then we can render it out. So I'm going to need like a C++ component, which is going to have a texture on it, which we're going to update. We're going to need... I mean, I should just run the experiment to see if I can first, to see if I can actually get away with it. Let's just write like a whole bunch of trash into a material, into a texture every frame that's just random garbage, and then we can draw that out and see if we can get away with 60 FPS on it or something like that. So how am I going to be able to do that? I'm going to need to make a C++ component that can tick stuff. We already have a C++ component, don't we, for some of this? That's water object. We need the test water. Wish I could grab a thumbnail for this thing. Just right here of an actual picture of water. That would be nice. So we have these flow field generators and all this stuff. We've got, which thing do we have on here? We had a variable, right? It was like calculated field, which is an actual object. So we should be able to use this calculated field object we already have on here. And where did we put it? Yeah, we've got this calculated flow field. So why don't we just start using that? Why don't we code it out real quick? So let's just kind of separate it a little bit. So this is going to have a U texture 2D pointer, which will be RM let's just call it dynamic ripple texture. And we're also going to have functions that we can update for this thing. So let's just have like void update ripples, and we'll need a U texture 2D star, we'll need get dynamic texture. And we'll need to be able to call those from blueprint land. So is there an init function that we actually call here? Alright, so map utils. We're probably also going to have to refactor some of this entire thing, or just move this off somewhere else. You calculate a flow field tick. Yeah, that's a different tick though. Right flow field, right flow objects, board pixels, tiered averages. Alright. So let's just get started working on this. Alright, so we'll update the ripples and all this stuff. So, alright, so we have our dynamic ripples. Let's just put some info on updating dynamic ripples. So let's see here. So if this is, let's just set this up to be garbage. So if this is null pointer, then we're going to go make a new texture, and then we're going to do stuff with it. Call to update the dynamic ripples, and this will be call to get our dynamic ripple texture. Alright, so how do we write to this texture? Didn't I make something where I created a dynamic texture